questions you have, so.
Chief, what happened, this morning, about 8:15? Give us the breakdown.
So we responded over to Golf Park Drive, for a report of shooting. Responded there, our officers got there, determined 2 individuals have been shot. Those names have been provided to you in the press release. Our detectives are actively working the case to determine what took place prior to our arrival and make sure they collect all the evidence that's possible to see and send off to the lab for examination.
Chief, I do want to ask a couple clarifying questions. Are we calling this a murder-suicide at this point?
Right now, this is homicide. We have 2 victims. We're not ruling anything out at this point. Our evidence will lead us to where it leads us, is what we usually tell folks. So we're going to not say that it is or isn't at this point. We want to make sure that we've checked all our boxes and we have all the information. There's certainly no threat or no danger to the community at this point. We want to make sure everybody knows that.
So not a murder-suicide, not a double homicide, I guess. I'm just trying to figure out how I want to word this so that people understand it correctly.
Yeah, so again, we're going to make sure that we look through all the evidence, talk to everybody we need to talk to determine what exactly took place. We're not ruling that out at this point, but again, we don't have any reason to believe that anybody in the community's safety is in jeopardy.
And then just one more clarifying question. Can you clarify the relationship of the 2 victims to each other?
Yeah, certainly. Mr. and Mrs. Robinson were husband and wife.
Okay, thank you. Just, this is a former chief of police. What's, the feeling around the department and for you personally right now?
Yeah, Chief Robertson retired in 1987, so there are no sworn officers remaining at the police department right now that worked under his command. Our longest tenured police officer here, sworn officer, was hired in 1988, so just after Chief Robertson left. It's certainly, anytime there's a loss of life, regardless of who that person is, what their title is, or where they work, that's something that concerns us as a police department. Obviously, this hits home a little bit. I'm not going to sit here and tell you otherwise. This is somebody who spent 32 years of his life at the police department. But we need to make sure this case is investigated without giving that consideration, quite honestly. We're going to make sure that we do everything that we can to investigate this, to determine factually what happened, and then take appropriate steps if there are any after that.
Did you have any personal relationship with them prior,
So I used to run into the former Chief Robertson at a FBI National Academy event we'd host here annually prior to COVID. Of course, it got shut down during COVID, but he'd come out. We'd bring in law enforcement folks from all around the state for an event once a year, and he was one of the folks that helped get that event started many, many years ago. So we run into him there and see him there usually about once a year.
Were there any prior domestic situations between them that are known?
That's something we'll look into to determine, not to my knowledge at this point, but that's something our detectives will be looking into to find out.
I know you said you had run into the former chief. Was he involved with LPD in any capacity, maybe seeing officers or anything in the last few years?
Nothing I'm aware of. I think most of his interactions was just social type events where we would be at things like the event we put on with the FBI National Academy Associates and things like that.
Chief, can you tell us a little bit more about his tenure, maybe like what he was able to get done during his tenure as chief of police?
Yeah, I really wish I could, but I got hired about 10 years after he retired. So all of the stuff I have is second or third hand. But I can tell you this, that all the information that has been shared with me through other people has been passed kind of down to us, is that he was a real good guy. He dedicated about 32 years of his life here, and was somebody that was in the Air Force, I believe, prior. I think he served in Korea through the Air Force prior to coming to the LPD. So certainly a long legacy of public service.